The Boston Celtics may be enjoying a quiet stretch in the offseason, but that doesn't mean there isn't anything cooking behind the scenes. Even in the so-called slow zone of the NBA calendar, there are storylines worth watching, especially when it comes to how the new ownership group is handling their first summer at the helm. While much of the offseason, the Celtics aren't just reshuffling the roster. They're adjusting to a brand new leadership dynamic that comes with its own set of questions, risks, and possibly rewards. Let's start with a name that may not be familiar to every fan just yet, but will be critical moving forward. Bill Chisholm. He's the face of a large consortium that has taken over majority ownership of the Celtics, a move that has naturally raised eyebrows and stirred up curiosity. When you hear about ownership shakeups in professional sports, your first instinct might be concern, especially if you're a fan of a winning team. You don't want anything to disrupt what's already working. And that's where the Celtics find themselves. Reigning champions, well-coached, well-run, and boasting one of the most talented rosters in the league. So when new leadership enters the chat and immediately starts trimming salaries, yeah, it's going to make fans pause. But let's be clear, the salary cutting likely wasn't just a Chisholm-led move. Even if the previous ownership, with WIC Grousbeck still technically involved, had stayed in control, this kind of financial reshaping was inevitable. The Celtics were facing a jaw-dropping luxury tax bill, with roster costs exceeding $500 million at the start of the offseason. That's simply not sustainable, not even for the most committed front offices. Since then, Boston has managed to slash that number down to just over $200 million. And even that's not the final cut. There's still at least one more move expected before the trade deadline, especially if they want to remain out of the repeater tax zone and avoid future penalties under the league's new collective bargaining agreement. What makes all of this more fascinating is the way the new ownership has, so far, chosen to operate. Instead of stepping in front of the camera and branding every move as the Chisholm era, they've stayed relatively quiet. They've let Brad Stevens do the talking, and that alone might be a clue to their mindset. Stevens, who has always been measured and media-verse, has become much more vocal this offseason. That's probably not a coincidence. It feels like the new owners are trying to present continuity by leaning on a familiar face to carry the messaging. Rather than becoming the story themselves, they've let their basketball minds take the stage. That's a smart move. Too often, new owners in pro sports rush to prove their presence by inserting themselves into basketball decisions, which tends to backfire. We've seen that story play out before, sometimes in dramatic fashion. Take Matt Ishbia, for instance. The Phoenix Suns owner has become the poster child for over-involvement in recent years. Whether it's courtside antics, questionable executive hires, or bold claims about being in the best position in the league, Ishbia has made himself part of the daily news cycle. And now, we're seeing the cracks. With the Suns facing uncertainty, losing key players like Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal, and entering the season with a roster that looks more like a patchwork than a contender, the risks of hyperactive ownership are front and center. Ishbia even tweeted a response to ESPN's rankings predicting a possible tumble for the Suns, brushing off the criticism and touting the toughness of his squad. But words don't win games, and tweets don't stop a roster from unraveling. The Celtics' new leadership would do well to learn from that and stay in the background. And so far, that's largely what they've done. Yes, they've made financial moves. Yes, they've shuffled some depth pieces around. But the core of this team remains untouched. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are still here. Derek White just got extended, and Brad Stevens is still calling the shots. That's the kind of stability you want to see in the early stages of a leadership transition. The concern, however, is what happens when adversity hits. What if the Celtics stumble out of the gate? What if injuries pile up or the chemistry feels off? Will this ownership group stay patient? Will they let basketball people make basketball decisions? Or will they reach for the control switch and start micromanaging? That's the unknown that lingers over this season. In the meantime, while we monitor that dynamic, we've also got some international flavor to spice things up. Eurobasket tipped off, and believe it or not, the Celtics have a little representation there too. Namely, big man Nemi Quetta, who's out there doing work for Portugal. During live play, he was already putting up numbers 15 points, 6 boards, an assist, shooting 7 for 8 from the field with a three-pointer in the mix. It's a small sample, sure, but Queda's progress is a storyline worth watching. The Celtics need reliable front-court depth, and while he's not expected to play major minutes, this kind of summer activity matters. If Queda can carve out a reliable role as a high-energy big who can finish around the rim and hold his own defensively, he might find himself part of the regular rotation come November. And while we're floating in this strange limbo of off-season news, we've also got the Russell Westbrook saga to keep things spicy. Russ, somehow, still doesn't have a team. The former MVP was recently seen working on his jumper from a yacht. Because of course he was. That's just peak Russ energy, right? No gym, no problem. He's getting those reps in, whether he's on hardwood or on a deck overlooking the ocean. It's a vibe. But the fact that he's in signed raises real questions. Is he being undervalued? Is he being punished for no longer being MVP-level Russ? Because let's be honest, he can still ball. He averaged 13 points, 6 assists, and 5 rebounds on solid efficiency last season. He even accepted a bench role. So what gives? It might just come down to fit. Westbrook has made it clear he prefers staying on the West Coast. That narrows the options. And let's face it, there aren't many contending teams out west with a glaring need for a high-usage backup guard. It's too bad, really, because he could bring instant energy to his second unit and still make winning plays. Imagine him coming off the bench for a team like Boston, running wild, finding shooters, bullying second units. That kind of chaos could be useful, but the fit isn't quite there. And from a salary cap standpoint, the Celtics probably wouldn't make it work anyway, not without more moves. Interestingly, Westbrook isn't the only notable name still floating in free agency. Ben Simmons is still unsigned. Al Horford still doesn't have a team. De'Anthony Melton is also available. And it feels like everything is being held up by the Golden State Warriors, who have yet to make any significant move this offseason. They haven't figured out what they want to do with Jonathan Kuminga, and that indecision is creating a ripple effect. Teams waiting to make secondary or tertiary moves are being forced to pause, especially if those moves involve trade exceptions or non-guaranteed deals that might hinge on Warriors' activity.
As for Boston, all of this uncertainty only reinforces the need for patience. There is no reason to rush into anything if the right opportunity hasn't materialized. At the same time, they can't afford to be passive forever. Whether it's moving someone like Sam Hauser or making a call on Anthony Simons, decisions are coming. And they're going to need to be both basketball savvy and financially strategic. That's where the ownership microscope comes back into focus. Because once the season begins, it's not just about wins and losses. It's about reactions. Do the owners stay the course if things get bumpy? Do they empower Brad Stevens to keep making smart, sometimes unpopular, decisions? Or do they fall into the same trap we've seen so many new owners fall into, thinking that having the most money automatically qualifies them to make basketball calls? So far, the signs have been positive. They've kept a low profile. They've shown support for the people already in place. But this season will test them. Because in Boston, expectations don't take a year off. Once the banner goes up, the pressure cranks even eager. And if this ownership group wants to start off on the right foot, the best thing they can do is trust the infrastructure that got the Celtics here in the first place. And as we transition from the bigger picture surrounding ownership to the smaller, but no less important, details of the Celtics' current roster situation, one name keeps popping up in conversations: Anthony Simons. The buzz around Simons isn't new. He's been a breakout scorer in Portland, a microwave-type guard who can get hot in an instant and put up points in bunches. But the conversation around him now has shifted, not to what he is, but to what he could be for a team like Boston. And the takes are polarizing. Some see him as an ideal six-man who could thrive in a dynamic second unit alongside someone like Peyton Pritchard. Others think he's more of a rental, a guy on an expiring deal that could help boost scoring for a few months before ultimately being flipped at the deadline. Either way, the Celtics have a decision to make. The challenge with Simons isn't about talent. Everyone knows he can score. It's about timing and finances. He's entering a contract year, which means whatever version of Simons we get this season will be the absolute best version is capable of giving. Players in contract years typically go all out. They fight for every stat, every moment, every minute, because they know the stakes are big. That's great if you're a team looking to squeeze out some extra juice from your rotation. But it also puts pressure on the front office. Because if Simons does explode, say is averaging over 25 points per game, knocking down over 40% of his threes, and showing improvement as a playmaker, then what? Are the Celtics going to pay him? Do they even have the cap flexibility to make that happen without getting something else? And this is where the numbers start to bite. Juve already committed massive extensions to Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Juve lacked in Derrick White. Juve got Kristaps Porzingis on the Bucks and Peyton Pritchard signed. Sam Hauser is on a team-friendly deal, but that won't last forever if his value continues to rise. So adding Simons into the long-term payroll equation feels unrealistic unless something gives. And if nothing gives, then it becomes an expensive rental, valuable in the short term, but not a piece of the long-term puzzle. That's fine if your goal is to go all in this season and deal with the consequences later. But based on the ownership's early moves, it don't feel like that's the plan. They seem committed to financial discipline. That don't exactly scream let's invest big in another scoring guard who plays minimal defense. Of course, this all changes if Simons is flipped before the deadline. In that case, it becomes an asset, a short-term value boost that could attract serious interest if it's playing well. That's the risk-reward proposition. You bet on him peaking early in the season, you chop him around aggressively in December and January, and maybe you land a high-end rotation piece or even a big man to help with playoff matchups. Because while Boston is loaded on the wings and in the backcourt, the front court still feels fragile. Porzingis has his injury history. Al Horford is a him. Neemias Queta is showing flashes overseas, but is still unproven at the NBA level. Luke Cornett is serviceable but limited. The Celtics need depth at the 5. They need someone who can hold their own when the game slows down in the postseason and physicality ramps up. So if Simons can be used as a stepping stone toward filling that gap, then the signing, whether via trade or temporary acquisition, starts to make a lot more sense. But that's all future talk. Right now, in this stagnant part of the off-season, we're left analyzing vibes. And speaking of vibes, let's talk about someone who brings them in spats, Russell Westbrook. Now, Westbrook is a divisive player at this point in his career. Some fans still read for him, admiring the fire, the passion, the relentless energy. Others see him as an inefficient volume shooter whose decision-making hurts more than it helps. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. What can't be denied, though, is that he still has something to offer. And yet, as we near the end of August, he still don't have a team. This past season, Russ showed flashes of what made him a star, even if those flashes came off the bench. He adapted to a new role with the Clippers, willingly sacrificed touches, and played within a system, most of the time. His per-game numbers were solid, double digits in points, respectable assist and rebound averages, and shooting splits that didn't torpedo his value. And yet, no one is calling. Part of that is because Russ reportedly wants to stay on the West Coast, which limits the field. But part of it is something deeper. It's the stigma of decline. Teams don't want to take a chance on a former MVP who might expect more than they're willing to give, both in minutes and in responsibility. But here's the thing, Russ don't seem to expect that anymore. He's shown a willingness to evolve, to accept a reduced role, to be a spark plug off the bench. And for the right team, that could be invaluable. Not every roster has a guy who can walk onto the floor and immediately raise the energy level. Not every locker room has a veteran who leads by example, who trains relentlessly, who cares. Westbrook checks all those boxes. The question is whether any team sees that as enough. For the Celtics, probably not. The fit isn't clean. They already have playmakers in Witte and Pritchard. They need floors passes and switchable wings more than they need another driver. But still, it's worth watching. Because if the does land on a contender, it could swing some playoff minutes. Is that kind of wild card? And then there's Ben Simmons. What an enigma. What a puzzle. The 11 dominant point forward is now an unrestricted free agent with more question marks than answers. The injuries, the confidence issues, the lack of a champion, it's all part of the package. And yet, like Bruce, there is still a version of Simmons that makes sense on the right team. A defender. A connector. A transition playmaker. If, and it's a massive if, is healthy and engaged. But that's the gamble, right? You send Simmons and you're not just betting on the body, you're betting on the mind, on the willingness to compete, to fight through the mess. In an earth-shattering twist that sent tremors across the basketball world. Whispers and murmurs have transformed into an undeniable frenzy as the news of Joel Embiid's decision to leave the Philadelphia 76ers for the Boston Celtics spreads like wildfire through locker rooms, social media, and the sports bars alike. Sources close to the situation, though not officially confirmed, suggest that behind closed doors, discussions have been feverish for weeks, with Boston aggressively pursuing the superstar center in what many insiders describe as a bold Knowles Barrett maneuver to shift the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. Fans are reportedly torn between disbelief and excitement, flooding forums, chat rooms, and trending hashtags with theories about how this seismic move could reshape not just team dynamics, but entire playoff narratives. Industry analysts, former players, and even casual observers are speculating that this is more than a trade, it is a calculated statement, a declaration that the Celtics are no longer willing to remain in the shadows of their rivals. The intensity of these rumors alone has already caused ticket sales to spike, merchandise to vanish from stores, and social media engagement to reach unprecedented levels. As everyone eagerly anticipates whether this is the dawn of a new era or a fleeting, dramatic rumor with consequences far beyond the court. Reports indicate that the negotiations surrounding EMBIID's transfer have been anything but straightforward, involving multiple layers of strategy, back-channel communications, and even late personal appeals from key Celtics figures aiming to convince the superstar to embrace a new city, new teammates, and a fresh vision. Sources hint at late-night phone calls, private meetings, and a flurry of agents, managers, and team executives operating behind the scenes, each pushing and pulling to achieve what insiders describe as a perfect storm scenario. Conversations reportedly touched on everything from salary structures to championship ambitions. With Boston positioning itself as the ideal environment for Embiid's unique talents to flourish while simultaneously promising a cultural fit that complements his leadership style. Meanwhile, Philadelphia fans, still reeling from the shockwaves of past playoff disappointments, are speculated to be experiencing a mix of betrayal and resignation. Unsure how to process the departure of a player who has been central to the franchise's identity for years. Social media has become a battlefield of emotions, with passionate debates and heated exchanges highlighting just how deep the impact of this rumored move could be, as pundits weigh in, crafting narratives about rivalries, legacy, and what this could mean for the broader landscape of the NBA in the seasons to come. The implications of Embiid joining the Celtics extend far beyond the immediate exchange of jerseys, touching every aspect of the league's competitive hierarchy and creating ripples that could alter draft strategies, free agency decisions, and even coaching philosophies. Observers speculate that Boston's front office has not merely acquired a talented center, but potentially a transformative figure whose presence could recalibrate the East and force teams across the conference to rethink defensive schemes. rotational strategies, and playoff preparations. Meanwhile, Philadelphia, now suddenly stripped of its cornerstone, faces uncertainty about its next steps, with rumors swirling that rebuilding plans might accelerate, threats could multiply. And team morale might be tested in was not seen for years. In locker rooms around the NBA, conversations are reportedly abuzz with tactical speculation, as players wonder how the Celtics' new alignment will affect scoring distributions, defensive matchups, and the flow of games against long-standing rivals. Analysts are framing this move as a potential game-changer, a scenario where the traditional hierarchy might be overturned, challenging even the most confident predictions about championship trajectories. Social media trends show fans dissecting every possible angle, from Embiid's fit with Boston's shooting guards and forwards to the chemistry and might develop with established stars, highlighting just how intricate and consequential this rumored decision could be, creating an environment of non-stop speculation and feverish anticipation. In addition to the on-court ramifications, this rumor has generated an off-court cultural storm, with journalists, bloggers, and influencers analyzing everything from Boston's marketing strategy to Philadelphia's brand image in the wake of a potential loss of one of its most recognizable faces. Conversations are reportedly ongoing regarding sponsorship deals, local endorsements, and fan engagement, with speculation about how Embiid's presence in Boston could influence ticket pricing, merchandise sales, and even the city's broader sporting identity. Meanwhile, Philadelphia-based media outlets are said to be grappling with how to frame the story, balancing outrage and disappointment with potential optimism about rebuilding opportunities. While Celtics-related platforms celebrate the rumored acquisition as a coup that could resonate for decades, the narrative has quickly evolved into a multi-layered discussion, encompassing basketball, business, and the broader cultural resonance of a superstar making such a high-profile shift. Fans are theorizing about emotional locker room dynamics, potential leadership challenges, and how this move could affect team cohesion in critical playoff moments, all while debates about Embiid's legacy intensify. This rumor, whether fully realized or not, has already demonstrated the power of speculation to dominate headlines, influence public perception, and captivate the attention of millions, proving that in modern sports, the story surrounding a player can sometimes eclipse the games themselves. As the NBA world holds its collective breath, every subtle hint, cryptic tweet, and insider whisper is being dissected, analyzed, and amplified, creating a media storm that few anticipated but everyone is now consumed by. Conversations around the league reportedly suggest that rival teams are scrambling to adjust strategies in anticipation of facing a reimagined Celtics squad led by a player of Embiid's caliber, while fantasy basketball managers are rumored to be revising their projections midstream. In Philadelphia, fans are reportedly organizing spirited discussions online and in person, debating the potential long-term impact on team identity, draft assets, and even the coaching staff's decision-making. Meanwhile, Boston supporters are said to be energized by the possibilities, imagining playoff runs that once seemed distant, speculating endlessly about how Embiid could integrate with existing stars and whether his arrival might finally push the narratives. The story, fueled by rumors and partial confirmations, has transformed from a simple trade possibility into a full-blown cultural phenomenon, a swirling vortex of speculation that underscores the unpredictable drama that makes basketball not just a sport, but a constantly evolving theater of human ambition, loyalty, and the ever-present thrill of the unexpected. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Boston Celtics, please subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. We always appreciate your comments and opinions. See you in the next video. For Orford, the market is strange. Es still productive. Es still smart. It can still hit threes and ensure a defense. But it's not a long-term piece, and most contenders already have their rotation set. Boston, in theory, could bring him back, and there is a romantic angle to that story. One last read. One more shot. But if the numbers don't work, and if the roster crunch is too tight, it might just not be realistic. Unless a trade clears some space, unless an unexpected opening appears, Orford McTabb to what? And that's a shame. Because it's still as value. It's still as something to give. But that's the reality of August. It's a month of waiting. Of posturing. Of unresolved narratives. And through it all, Celtics fans are trying to piece together a vision of what this season might actually look like. Will there be a surprise move before a training camp? Will someone like Simons start hot and force the front office into a tough call? Will someone like Nehemias rise through the ranks and solve the front court depth issue internally? And what about the vibes? That's always an underappreciated factor. Last year's group had great chemistry. Tatum and Brown were lacking with stride in his expanded role. Porzingis stayed healthy for most of the season. There was a flow, a rhythm to how they played. Can that survive another round of roster tweaks and salary shedding? In theory, yes. The Celtics have enough top-end talent to cover up minor depth concerns. They have one of the best coaches in the league. They have continuity in leadership, even with the new ownership. Stevens is still steering the ship. But all of that rests on things staying relatively stable. A few injuries, a rocky start, or an ego flare-up, and suddenly the balance tips. That's when ownership matters most. That's when the decisions made behind closed doors can ripple out into the locker room. And that's what makes this season so important, not just for the players on the court, but for the people now signing the checks. So here we are, late August, stuck between summer league memories and training camp anticipation. Not a lot is happening, but everything feels important. Every comment from Brad Stevens. Every clip from Eurobasket. Every rumor about Westbrook or Simmons or Orford. Because it all fits into the bigger question, what are the Celtics building? Is this the beginning of a dynasty? A run of multiple championships built around Tatum and Brown, with savvy role players and a smart financial management? Or is it a one-and-done title window, destined to close the moment the luxury tax becomes too much to bear? The answers won't come today. But the signs are there if you're looking. And right now, they say Boston is trying to thread the needle, stay competitive, stay flexible, stay together. Whether they can pull it off, well, that's what makes this season worth watching. But before we continue, please remember to subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest news about the Boston Celtics. Feel free to share your thoughts on the news in the comments as well.